Yo, what is up YouTube? James here, and today we're going to be going over an in-depth look at the team building process for my 2025 Pokemon VGC World Championship team. And I do have a video on this team that does feature the normal stuff of back-to-back battles where we have a slight overview of the team and then we go into the battles. But I thought, you know what, some might appreciate the more in-depth stuff of like how I really ended up crafting the team, and I thought it'd be too long for that video. So I also do realize that a lot of my content on that channel does have a lot of battle action, and some might not appreciate the in-depth aspects as much. So I decided, hey, you know what, I want to create a bonus channel, have all of my deep VGC analysis on this channel instead, and maybe some extra stuff that, you know, true James fans would appreciate. So if you are interested in that kind of content, please help by leaving a like on the video, subscribing to the channel, because it would appreciate it. Because right now, of course, it is a brand new channel, no advertisements and no sponsorships on this channel, at least for now. So I would appreciate it if you do appreciate this in-depth knowledge, that you do those things. So let's go over how I ended up building the team for the 2025 World Championship. So I think we should go back to the beginning of where it really started in Gen 9, which is going to be the Regulation G format. If you don't know, Regulation I was a double restricted format, which means you could bring 2 legendaries on a team, but in Reg G it was a 1 restricted format. And the 2024 Pokemon World Championship, I ended up bringing Kyogre as a route to my Kyogre Zacian and Kyogre Xerneas heritage that I really just had at the 2019 and 2022 Pokemon World Championships. However, Kyogre has made quite a bit of changes since Generation 8, and that is really having to rely in very inaccurate moves in order to really be utilized, because I think the best moves that Kyogre does have access to involve Hydro Pump and Origin Pulse. They're not very accurate, and they already costed me like a round in that World Championship, so I pretty much had dropped the Kyogre builds at that point. I really was like, okay, after getting crit in my round 2 in game 3, after that, and forcing myself to go for Hydro Pump, because if I didn't get crit I could probably just Water Spout and win realistically, but unfortunately because I got crit I was put a bit behind, so I had to go for Hydro Pump. Unfortunately did miss that Hydro Pump, and that was the only Hydro Pump I went for in that set, and the only one I really had to hit, because otherwise I'd be able to click Water Spout afterward and clean up. But I needed the extra damage to single target for Hydro Pump, and it didn't work out. So that's basically how I ended up using Kyogre. It caused me to tilt and not even win a single game at the 2024 World Championship. The only win I got was a bye. So unfortunate circumstances there, and I vowed not to use Kyogre for the rest of this generation. So unless I really felt it was broken, but I felt it wasn't going to be as necessary. So 2025 comes around, we have Reg G Part 2, and we have the single restricted format once again, and I am without a restricted this time, and I decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to use probably the restricted I probably like the most out of all of it, which is going to be the Calyx Shadow Rider. Now, I've had some Calyx Shadow Rider experience in the past with my 2022 experience, because I did get top 8 at NIC with a Calyx Shadow Rider build. It wasn't Nasty Plot, it was Calyx Shadow Rider plus Zacian, but I have very big familiarity with this Pokemon. I've used the Nasty Plot version before. I've used Pokemon like Xerneas, which is kind of similar to how Shadow Rider does like to play. So I felt like it was a pretty comfortable pick, and it was probably the restricted that I probably had the most fun. And more importantly, it did have all accurate moves, which I do appreciate on the restricted Pokemon that is trying to sweep the game, because as I said before, I took a very risky gamble at Worlds at 24, utilizing Kyogre as my main sweeper with very inaccurate moves, and it did not pay off. So wanted something with more consistency. I ended up bringing Calyx Shadow Rider, and the team you're seeing currently right now on your screen is going to be the team that I basically brought to the EUIC in 2025, as well as the Vancouver Regional Championship in 2025, which was like a week after UIC, with maybe like a few slight changes. The version you're really seeing is going to be my Vancouver version, but it basically was the same build throughout. It just had a few changes, like Psy Shock was for EUIC into Psychic for the Vancouver Regional Championship. I also had maybe like a few EV spread changes or slight ones, but for the most part it is pretty much the same. So basically I really like the idea of just standard Calyx Shadow Rider. It was really fun. I ended up going with a pretty bulky set paired with Frengar Clefairy because it was pretty consistent across the board. Had the core, of course, Incineroar and Rillaboom, the fake out and pivoting duo, which is just fantastic. They're just great in so many different matchups. Had the Choice Scarf Urshifu because it was one of the best mons to handle the Terra Normal and Terra Dark Calyx Shadow Riders and punish them if they go for the Terra against my Calyx Shadow Rider. I can then set up my Urshifu to get a KO with Close Combat, which was pretty big. I even ran Rain Dance at EIC, which was a big tech that I ended up bringing, mainly because of the fact that it was a thing that I could actually lead into Koraidon Raging Bolt, which was actually really annoying for their team, so it ended up helping out there. And then I had this Mienshao because I really like the idea of a mon that could really help out against Terapagos, as well as like the hyper offensive Calyx Shadow Rider matchup because of the wide guard. So this is what I ended up using for a lot of Regulation G. Granted, I only played like 2 events back then, which was going to be EIC Vancouver. I didn't even really play too much because I was kind of on a break season at this point, so I only had like a little bit of experience here and there with this team, but I felt like my general fundamentals with like how Incineroar, Rillaboom, I've of course used this for several generations at this point. The Shadow Rider, of course, is something like a good setup mon that can sweep teams. I'm very well known for how I position these kinds of mons, so I have a lot of experience there. And just good general support mons. Like I love Clefairy. It's one of my favorite mons in competitive. And of course, Urshifu is just super strong, and the Mienshao was just really good. It was great pre-UIC, especially because it was winning a big grassroots tournament in Japan. So I ended up using this 6, and I was actually going to translate it towards the Regulation I format, and that's basically where we get started with. I think we'll transition to the first version of the Koraidon build. So if you don't know, the story goes that I end up using this team for Vancouver with the Calyx Shadow Rider, and then I'm kind of locked in on Shadow Rider at this point. I really like Calyx Shadow Rider. I was testing maybe like a few Zacian Kyogre builds here and there just to test it out. I really thought they were underwhelming personally, as like they could do well into certain teams, but the thing is, if you have to even hit your moves in the positive matchups to do well, it's just like it always gives an opportunity for them to come back in the game. And then in the really bad matchups, like you need everything to go right plus hitting your moves. Like, yeah, it's just a tough duo to bring. So I was like pretty sure I wasn't bringing Kyogre Zacian unless I found some kind of incredible magical build with the duo, but I just didn't really believe in the duo just because of how differently it plays. If you don't know, my 2022 Worlds team didn't have any accurate moves on the Kyogre or the Zacian because I didn't run Play Rough. I ran Sacred Sword Substitute at the World Championship, and then Kyogre, I mean, had one inaccurate move in Thunder, but it's in rain, so it's 100% accurate, so I don't really count that. And yeah, so I don't really like how Kyogre Zacian ended up having to play, especially with like a lot of the current builds. You'd have to really rely on inaccurate moves like Bleak Wind Storm sometimes. Of course, you do have the rain, but there are cases like there's the Icicle Crash, Xian Pao that players do opt for, and some other stuff. Like, it's just so many moves at that point. Like, I wanted something more consistent, at least for this World Championship. So I ended up taking my Vancouver team, and basically I just ended up replacing the Mienshao with Zamazenta because it's a no-brainer, right? It's a wide guard fighting type that's good into Terapagos, and that's basically what my Mienshao was meant to accomplish, right? So I decided, hey, you know what, I'm gonna put Zamazenta. And then I was using Zamazenta Calyx Shadow Rider for like the first like couple weeks to a month of Regulation I, but you know, everyone kind of had the same idea, and it wasn't like this was like a crazy innovative build. It was still doing good. Like, I was still pretty solid with the build overall. The problem is I kind of realized, oh, Zamazenta is a lot harder to switch out than Mienshao, because with Zamazenta you only get the boost once per game, and I don't really like that fact because I would really love to switch out my Zamazenta. If I'm able to switch out my Zamazenta, like, I could pivot out my fake out mons more to support the Shadow Rider course and like some other scenarios. But with the problem with Shadow Rider plus Zamazenta is that you really don't want to switch out Zamazenta in a lot of cases, because the defense boost, once you lose it, you never get it back, and that means you're doing a lot less damage, you're taking attacks a lot worse. So it's a mon that really just prefers staying in a lot of cases, or timing it really precisely, which I'm not a huge fan of because I felt like it was very limiting, like getting into the right board states using Zamazenta. Granted, it was still a strong mon, of course, like it's an absurd crazy combination, but I felt that it was really restricting me on some of the ways that I would really like to play my other restricted for the most part. So I decided, you know what, I think that there were a few problems there. There were also some things that, of course, like Calyx Shower, Zamazenta didn't exactly appreciate. Scarf Urshifu, Shiyu's, Sun in general. There were just quite a few things that were just annoying me about this build across the board. So I was like, including the mirror. The mirror was very frustrating because you have so many mind games with the wide guard and a bunch of other potential speed ties. For example, who has the faster Zamazenta? Are they bulky enough to live like a Life Orb +2 Calyx Shadow Rider, which I had swapped to? So at this point, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try a different build. So I hadn't been planning to play too much. Like, I wasn't even sure like if I was going to even try hard for this World Championship. I've mentioned this several times, but again, I'm on a break period at this point, so I'm not really too interested. I had a few friends who were contacting me, like asking for help on their Bologna special event, which was the Italy special event right before NIC, and NIC help prep in general. So I was like, you know what? Let's see what happens. So I ended up building a pretty fun core because I just had the idea randomly, and I felt like it was pretty nice. And this is where we get into the first version of the team, which was Koraidon Calyx Shadow Rider. It kind of came into my head because I'm like, you know, Sun is pretty strong when you think about it, and kind of solves the Scarf Urshifu problem, or Urshifu in general, because Urshifu is one of the biggest Pokemon that pressure the Calyx Shadow Rider, right? And it's really hard to protect in front of the Urshifu with Shadow Rider. Of course, Certain Strikes in Rain is also like pretty annoying for Zamazenta plus Calyx Shadow Rider. I'm like, okay, what can solve this issue? And I was like, Koraidon doesn't sound bad. It's still the ghost fighting coverage, which is amazing coverage in general. Of course, fighting does hit the dark and the normal types that are immune or resistant to the Astral Barrage. But also Koraidon, if positioned right, can do really well against opposing Shadow Rider because he had the Flame Charge as well to make sure you outspeed without having to rely on the Scarf. Granted, you can hit to protect, but I think it's not like a terrible trade-off across the board. And I thought, you know what, I think I actually really like this idea because Koraidon's really strong, of course, and it allows me the option to really run Koraidon, Calyx Shadow Rider, Rillaboom, and Incineroar, which, granted, if you want to bring Urshifu when they had Zamazenta, you would usually have to leave one of Rillaboom or Incineroar behind in most cases because you wanted Shadow Rider, Zamazenta, Urshifu, and then one of the other two, right? But I could bring the double fake out. I could still have the really strong fighting type coverage, as well as the Shadow Rider, which are both like fantastic, and Koraidon can switch more. It had better answers to Kyogre teams. It just felt pretty strong. Of course, there are upsides and downsides to the combo in general, which I guess I'll get into after I kind of go over like the final thoughts of this process. But yeah, I felt like it was going to be a pretty fun combination. I'm like, why not try it out? So at that point, I had pretty much been falling in love with just the Life Orb Calyx Shadow Rider because even though I was using bulky spell tag, like that was usually with Clefairy, I'd be able to usually set up like 2 nasty plots in general pretty safely and then sweep with Astral Barrage. Here in this format, I think it's a lot tougher too. So having the initial damage output after 1 nasty plot, I felt like was just pretty huge in this point. So I just felt like Life Orb Shadow Rider was the correct call. And if I'm setting up Flame Charge Koraidon, in a lot of cases, you want Clear Amulet to make sure you're not getting Intimidate cycles. So that was the idea for the items for the Restricted Duo. I also did test like some stuff like Sash Calyx Shadow Rider plus the Life Orb Koraidon. I also tested Dispel Tag as well on the Calyx Shadow Rider, but I felt like I just really liked at this point Life Orb as well as Clear Amulet. And the build, I made this version probably like towards the last week of May. That was the prototype that I sent this. So yeah, and that was the combination. Then we have Rillaboom and Incineroar. I've been using this pretty much. I mean, it's not like anything crazy, but they're just great partners. I also thought Rillaboom was really nice because you do have that combination of the grassy terrain as well as sun, so you have both weather and terrain control, which is just pretty nice in general. The Incineroar, which, you know, can take advantage if necessary. I did try out Flare Blitz at times, but mostly I was the knockoff helping hand set for the most part. You might even notice that the current one you're looking at does have leftovers as the item, which was an interesting choice. But at this point, it was like Amoonguss was just non-existent at this point, and I was testing a few different items from Covert Cloak to leftovers, and the idea of getting leftovers in grassy terrain, because this team was able to pivot a lot with Rillaboom and Incineroar, like being able to heal in front of like the Lisi Caliisis, where it's actually kind of massive, and it really did help in that matchup. So that's why I had leftovers Incineroar back then. Like, this was one of the initial builds, and it actually did put in a lot of work for the time period. Like, leftovers Incineroar, I wouldn't have slept on it. It was actually pretty good. So yeah, otherwise you could have Helping Hand support next to Koraidon for the big KO, or Helping Hand plus Calc Shatterite, of course, is big monsters. So yeah, there were a lot of things that I could be able to do with the build. Then I ended up having Ogerpon Heartflame, and I felt like this made sense because redirection, of course, is really nice. It takes advantage of the sun, so Ivy Cudgel boosting the sun can do a lot, and I mean a lot of damage, especially with Helping Hand Incineroar. So I felt like the team was really well synergized there and would be able to really help out with the redirection once again, that really strong damage output. And even just Grassy Glide priority, of course, is fantastic. Being able to help out against like the Flutter mains. The EV spread here, I don't remember what this does. I'm pretty sure this is either supposed to live Chien Pao, Sword of Ruin, with the Koraidon, or not Koraidon, the Zamazenta body press next to Chien Pao, Sword of Ruin, or it was supposed to live the Jolly Life or Close Combat from Koraidon. I had like several different EV spreads. Like I just remember this version fondly because it was like one of the very initial drafts of the team. So yeah, that's basically what the Ogerpon Heartflame does. And then Regieleki. And the reason I have Regieleki on this team is because I think in the Calyx Shatter format, where the Mon is pretty popular, you kind of need a rule set of you need at least one thing guaranteed fast in Calyx Shadow Rider that isn't just max speed Calyx Shadow on your own. And for me, it was like, okay, I'm either gonna have a booster energy Mon, or I'm gonna have a Mon that's just naturally faster, or a Choice Scarf Mon potentially. Obviously I had Urshifu, and that wasn't gonna fly, so I ended up going with the Focus Sash Regieleki because I felt the team was a little bit weak to Tailwind. As you know, that's from the initial build, it is Dream Mon's weak to flying. Tornadus, Kyogre is 100% not fun for this team. So I ended up having a fast electric type Mon that was just able to pressure the Tornaduses, which I felt like was pretty necessary. It also helped out in the Shadow Rider matchup because I could go for Electroweb plus either my own attack from Calyx Shadow Rider or the Koraidon, or I could go for Electroweb next to Ogerpon Heartflame, and a really strong hit in the sun to do a ton of damage. So that was the idea basically behind it. And yeah, this was the first initial draft. I ended up experimenting with a few different builds, but for the most part, this was the initial idea of like the Koraidon Calyx Shadow build, and it's what I built off over time. Like, it was a really strong prototype. It was a really good team for what I had. And yeah, I kept experimenting a little bit with it because it was just a fun team. Like, I was having fun with this team. It's probably one of the most fun builds that I had up to this point. So yeah, that is going to be the first version. Then we can move on to the North American International Championship prototype. So if you don't know, I didn't actually go to the NIC this year. I didn't go last year either, but that was due to a wedding. This year is just because I already qualified, and obviously there are current economic conditions which hasn't made it exactly great for like business expenses and travel recently. I just decided, hey, you know what, I already qualified for Worlds, very likely to at least. I'm just gonna probably skip this year, and you know, the market's down. I'm gonna put a bit of money into the market and see how that goes. So that was the idea. Don't regret it a bit. But yeah, so this was the team I did experiment with in general, like leading up towards NIC, because I also had a friend who was going to NIC and they asked me for a team. Shout out to Marab. That's my boy. He ended up actually finishing 5-3 at the event, and he hasn't really played too much Pokemon. Like, this was like one of his first big events coming back. He actually did pretty well in seniors back in the day, like several years ago. So it was cool being able to come back to VGC and actually having a pretty respectable NIC run, where I don't remember who he got eliminated by, but I do remember he had some tough opponents. Like, he went to game 3 against the NIC champion Federico, and yeah, like, I felt that the core was pretty strong for what it was. So this was my pre-NIC build, and yeah, like, I mean, it had the same stuff, right? It had the Calyx Shadow Rider, the Koraidon, which was pretty much the same. Rillaboom had maybe slight EV adjustments. I made its pretty special defense. The EV spreads were for like Miraidon Draco Meteor, Helping Hands, and the Calyx Shadow Rider Ash Barrages, which pretty much would just live 2 Astral Barrages guaranteed at that point. So yeah, the Life Orb versions especially. So felt like it was pretty good. The Incineroar ended up changing. I like Leftovers, but I think Amoonguss was starting to pick up a little bit more at the time. So I'm like, you know what? Ghost Safety Goggles is pretty safe for the most part. Still running the Ghost Terra type. I ended up changing the Incineroar Terra types like multiple times. Like it was Bug, Ghost. I had Water at some point, and Fairy too. There's so many there's so many variants where I don't even remember if I had Bug or Ghost at this point. I think I had Ghost for this version because I had Wide Guard on the Smeargle, but yeah, like either way it could go completely fine. And then the 2 new additions which I ended up experimenting with, which were Smeargle, because as I said before, you might not believe me, but I was talking a lot on my podcast known as the Breakfast Club. And if you don't know the Breakfast Club, probably, yeah, like I was showcasing like so much about Smeargle, like I think towards it, and I was very shocked that not many people were running Smeargle at this point, because this mon is absurd in restricted format with how many support moves it got. Like I was experimenting so many different versions of Smeargle at this point that I felt like I was just surprised that no one was running it. I thought this mon was good. Also, Regieleki I thought was really good. So I'm very shocked that no one really were paying attention to these mons. But sure, the Smeargle I thought was pretty absurd on Calyx Shadow Rider and Koraidon, mainly because of a few reasons. One is of course a ghost immunity, so you put on pressure against opposing Shadow Rider. Smeargle Calyx Shadow Rider is a pretty dumb combination, especially since we've seen like Smeargle Xerneas before if you're an old head, and yeah, like that combo is just demonic overall. So felt that it was going to be a pretty decent call. Like it just allows for a lot of support for the team in general, because you have to spawn the grassy terrain for the combination of like the Miraidon teams. Follow me redirection you still are able to keep the Wide Guard support, which is pretty nice. So you might notice that I didn't have Regieleki on this build, so I don't exactly have a mon that's faster than the Calyx Shadow Rider. So you might be thinking, oh, I broke my rule, or my rule that I mentioned before where I had Eleki because it was a faster mon than Calyx Shadow Rider. And I felt like it's okay if you have max speed Shadow Rider plus Wide Guard support, and then also the Flame Charge Koraidon. So I felt like I could balance out still regardless, as long as I had like either a really good Wide Guard mon in Smeargle or like one of those. I'm also like pretty low on Tailwind stocks at this point. I'm not a big fan of like Tornadus or Whimsicott and how it performs on the build at this point. So yeah, like I was pretty happy with like just running Wide Guard Smeargle, supporting with the Calyx Shadow Rider, because it was also pretty good into like the Calyx Shadow Rider plus the Zamazenta teams for the most part, because you could play a lot of mind games there. And yeah, I was actually experimenting with Decorate Smeargle like before it became a big thing by Kinugawa at NIC, and then ended up winning Japan now. It's like I was testing a bunch of sets on Smeargle. I had Spiky Shield at one point. Decorate was probably the one I was experimenting with the most, and my friend ended up bringing I think Fake Outs on Smeargle to NIC, which isn't my personal favorite because you already have double Fake Out and Rillaboom and Incineroar. So I was usually experimenting with either Decorate or Spiky Shield for the most part. I was even like experimenting with like moves on the Smeargle. Like I was going crazy in the builder in some cases. There are like points where I was running Mortal Spin, Ruination, and yeah, I was going pretty crazy with the Smeargle sets in general. But across the board, felt it was fantastic. TV spread here allows you to live Choi's banned Rapid Strike Urshifu Surging Strikes while in Sun. Like that is absurd. Like the fact that Smeargle can survive that thanks to the Sun, I felt like that's why I really like the idea of Koraidon Smeargle Calyx Shadow, because nerfing the Urshifus on the opposing side, being able to just survive the Surging Strikes, it's just it was pretty insane, because I felt like a lot of the plans were either going for the Miraidon, but of course you had the grassy terrain and the Spore Pressure, or the Urshifu to get around a Sash. But hey, guess what? The Spore Pressure after surviving the Surging Strikes, yeah, that's a thing you have to deal with. So I felt like the combo was pretty nasty overall. And then the last one was Raging Bolt, because I had like Decorate stuff, again Tailwind teams like Torn, plus the Urshifu or Kyogre with Rain Dance were still pretty annoying to the team. So you kind of need a mon that's able to break through that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to run Raging Bolt here instead of Eleki, because the Smeargle is taking the Focus Sash. I don't really like any other item on Eleki. At this point, I did debate about running like bulky choice specs Alaki, but it just doesn't play the same. So just ended up going with like a bulkier set with a magnet raging bolt that was able to like do quite a bit of damage after the decorate. And you know, having an electric switch is of course appreciated against a Miraidon team. So that was basically the idea behind the NIC build. I think Marab did end up running a few slight different EVs and spreads across the board. Like the Incineroar was definitely slower on my build. I had like imperfect speed IVs. I think I was like running, I don't remember at this point. I was like 25 or 27 at this point because I wanted a slower parting shot, but you get the idea. It's basically the same exact EV spreads for this point. Shadow Rider, Koraidon were the same, Incineroar, Rillaboom were the same, and then there's just the 2 adjustments. So that was the pre-NIC build. And yeah, like I felt like it was a pretty strong build in general. The only problem I had was now Smeargle was common. Like after NIC in Japan Nats, Smeargle was pretty everywhere, and I didn't really want to play the Smeargle mirror with Shadow Rider, especially when they had Zamazenta. And then there are some other things that were still a little bit annoying to the team, like taking damage from the Zamazenta was actually probably one of my biggest fears. Zamazenta was, you know, so strong mon, and they were using it on a bunch of different builds. So at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, I think it was a good call. Like at this point, I think this was the team I would have brought to NIC if I did go with the Smeargle Raging Bolt, and I think it would have been a pretty good call going into NIC in general. Like obviously my friend did pretty well for it, but I think I could have done well with this build as well. But I decided, you know what, enough Smeargle. It's a little bit too inconsistent at times for like really strong line game plans, and Smeargle is just that mon where, you know, it can be, of course I could opt not to run Moody, but realistically, like Smeargle Moody, like it's more mathematical chance that you're just going to get a good Moody boost off it, so you might as well take it. But I decided, you know what, I'm going to go for something more consistent across the board for this World Championship if I am going to bring it. So we go after NIC in Japan Nats, and we go into the final build, because I actually had pretty much the final build locked up at this point about a week after NIC. Like a little bit after Japan Nats, like around that time, I actually had the build completely finished at this point for the most part, or at least the 6. So this is the final pace that you're looking at on your screen, which was the exact build that I brought to the 2025 World Championship. Of course, the initial 6 had maybe a few slight differences as I was messing around quite a bit, but across the board, I ended up going with the final 6 of Calyx, Shadow Rider, Koraidon, Rillaboom, Incineroar, Volcarona, and Regieleki. So my logic is that Koraidon, Calyx, Shadow Rider, Rillaboom, Incineroar, really good, and I mean really good. So had a very strong performance across the board. Felt like the 6 or the 4 was just pretty much, you couldn't go wrong, because it is a very powerful duo. You have the ghost fighting coverage, you have the double fake out, you can play out of a lot of different matchups. You have intimidate, terrain, and weather control alongside a really fast mon, so there wasn't really much you could do. I was still running basically the max speed Calyx Shadow Rider at the point where it was like post NIC when I finished the 6 mons I was gonna have on the team, but it ended up changing over time. The Volcarona was the new addition, and Volcarona was picking up pretty much towards the end of NIC at this point, and I felt like after thinking about it, like Volcarona was just absurd. Like I was testing like support Volcarona early on this build when I had the Heartflame version, but I felt like, okay, I really like setup. If you don't know, I really love playing setup mods, and Volcarona, I thought with the Koraidon, like it's super threatening to get Volcarona at +1 or +2, and I kind of thought about this where like I tried, you know, some Quiver Dance Volcarona sets on like the YouTube channel, and I've always felt it was super underwhelming in a lot of cases because a lot of them are timid, a lot of them are struggle bug, and the damage just wasn't really there. After like, you know, trying out Volcarona on this team, my thoughts really just completely 180'd, because when you think about it, we have a bulky Volcarona. If it gets 2 Quiver Dances up and it's under the sun, this mon is pretty much one-shotting or two-shotting everything in the format. Like it is absolutely absurd what Volcarona can do, especially against like the more defensive teams in general. Like across the board, it is really powerful. So I ended up really liking the idea of Volcarona setup wise, and ended up finalizing it. Now this mon went through so many different changes. The EV spread pretty much stayed the same for the most part. The only really big debate is, was I going to change the speed EVs on Regieleki, because the only awkward part is the Volcarona +2 speed ties with Regieleki. I had that situation maybe happen once or twice. Wasn't sure if it was worth any investment change on either, because all the EVs on Volcarona were just beautiful at this point. And honestly, I didn't really want to change the Eleki. So you know what? I was like, you know what? This situation is just never going to happen. It's just like so unlikely it was going to happen at that point. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to change it. So the Volcarona, I knew I wanted to be bulky set. This one does allow you to live a guts boosted facade from Ursaluna after an intimidate from the Incineroar. So that's the idea for like all the defense. And of course you want Volcarona to be physically defensive in this format, especially if you're not running like an electric or grassy seed. You want to be able to tank the attacks from physical hits, because Volcarona doesn't have the best physical defense in the world, and when you're trying to take hits from like Zamazenta, is very important too. So really going with a lot of defense. You might be wondering, why am I not going timid so I can outspeed Calyx Shadow Rider? One, I have Regieleki. Two, I have my own Calyx Shadow Rider, which was max speed at that point, so wasn't the biggest deal. And I also had Koraidon, and I had Roar and Incineroar, which I'll get into. But yeah, so this Volcarona ended up changing a ton because I wanted the Terra type of so many different types. I was originally Grass Terra type, which was supposed to help like in the Kyogre matchup, but also like power up the Giga Drain, resist ground. But I was like, man, there are so many Terra types I wanted, and I wanted something for Flare Blitz from opposing Incineroar, because they're going to be in the sun. If I bring Koraidon, I need to still resist Glacial Lance, which I would appreciate. I would like to resist Electric if possible, but that's most likely not going to happen, because that is just something you can't really do. The Kyogre water type attacks or Urshifu water attacks and rain, if it does come down to the situation, I would like to avoid. And yeah, there was just like no perfect Terra type that really covered every single situation that I wanted my Volcarona to really cover here. I even considered Dark for the Encore situations from Whimsicott, as well as the Tauntaurons, and then of course being able to be resistant to Calyx Shadow Rider, Astral Barrage, but it would be problematic against the Zamazenta. So at the end, I had to choose one type to be weak to, and I decided, you know what? I don't Terra Volcarona that much in the Miraidon matchup. I'm just going to go water, especially because of the Incineroar plus Cali Ice positions. I'd rather just have water Terra type for those situations. I just ended up going with water. So that was the idea. I had so many Terra types I was testing, and trust me, like this was the one Terra type that was just frustrating me, because I had so many different Terra types that I wanted in different situations. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to stick with water and see how it goes. And water was probably the most useful Terra type from there. Even though I was risking like some games where I had to Terra water Volcarona in front of Miraidon that was still around. Yeah, like it's still, I felt like was the best Terra type by far for me. And it did come out well in the World Championship. So I did Terra water Volcarona a few times, and it was fantastic. So yeah. Then the few changes here, we have the Regieleki back again, and as I mentioned before, I want a Pokemon that's at least guaranteed faster than opposing Calyx Shadow Rider. And I thought I have 3 flying weeks. I need something that beats the Tornadus. So Regieleki came back into play. It's still good against the hyper offense teams, especially with the Torn. The Electro Web is just super punishing. Good into any Kyogre build in general because of the Volt Switch pressure. So yeah, it was pretty good. Also, I forgot to make a mention of Volcarona. Another reason I wanted water Terra type over like grass, which I had initially, was so I wasn't super weak to flying in general, especially the Roaring Moon stuff, because Zacian Kyogre plus Roaring Moon, like it was still pretty positive for me, but getting crit by Acro is not fun in general. So decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go with water Terra type. It's pretty safe for the most part, especially because like the most common build ended up dropping like Iron Hands or Rillaboom at that point on the 6. So yeah, water Terra type was just perfect for me, just to guarantee that matchup if necessary. The Regieleki, again, it was super strong in the Tailwind stuff and good into opposing Calyx Shadow Rider, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna keep Regieleki. It's pretty strong. I really do like how the Mon plays, and I don't know if it's a Mon that many opponents have really dealt with. I also considered Focus Sash Flutter Mane, and I tested Focus Sash Flutter Mane throughout like my entire time period of using like Koraidon plus Calyx Shadow Rider. We even seen it do well with Gabriel Gotti getting a good placement, top 16 at NIC. The only problem I had with Flutter Mane over Regieleki was you're doubling up the weaknesses of Astral Barrage, so you have the same type weaknesses. I do like the fact that I am able to hit dragons though, because one of the problems with the team in general is being able to hit through Terra Dragon stuff, and even just hitting dragon types in general. Like Miraidon's a little bit hard to like initially damage, a Koraidon, a bunch of others without the Moonblast, so that's something that did allow for Fluttermane to have access to. The only problem is Fluttermane makes your Tailwind matchup a lot weaker in general, I think, because you do get pressured by Pokemon like the Calyx Shadow Rider on the opposing side, the Kyogre stuff. Like, it makes Rain a lot worse in my opinion. It can make a opposing Calyx Shadow Rider a bit better, although I don't think it was like really necessary at that point. You can't damage the Torn, which I felt like was pretty big, and I'm kind of glad I kept Eliki, because even though it made the Torn matchup a lot harder. I think the fact that they made the Torn matchup a lot harder was just what solidified Eliki. Like, Eliki was still probably not the most used mon in my tournaments, but in general, like, I think I faced like 2 Torns at least throughout my run, so I'm very happy that I had Eliki across the board. And it's also awkward to position Fluttermane, because if you're trying to set up a Shadow Rider by leading like Fake Out plus Shadow Rider, you can't get Fluttermane in after you turn a Parting Shot. You have to go Koraidon first, and then you have to find out how to bring the Fluttermane in afterward. So that's kind of why I like Regieleki, because Regieleki, what it allows you to do, Shadow Rider plus one of the Fake Out mons, pivot into Eliki, Electro Astral afterward. Pretty safe. So that's why I like Eliki more than like Fluttermane on this build. Even though Fluttermane can be more oppressive in some cases, like, I felt that the Eliki kind of helped synergize the weaknesses that the team had a bit better. But it did, again, allow me to have problems with the Dragon Terras. Luckily, Dragon Terra's Zamazenta was fading, and even if they're Terra Dragon or just Dragon types in general, Volcarona at +2 with Fiery Dance was still two-shotting like a lot of these Pokemon, so in the sun. So I was like, you know what, I'll take that risk, whatever. Then we have Incineroar for Roar. Roar ended up picking it up a little bit after NIC, and you know, I kind of had the idea of Roar Incineroar. I was also still on Helping Hands as well. There were a few different versions that I had with Roar, Helping Hand, and then like other moves like Flare Blitz. I had Protect on one point, which Protect was actually pretty good, but overall I was like, okay, what do I want the most? And I kind of like the idea of Roar Incineroar, because there are some cases where I can roar out a Side Roar. Like, Side Roar is actually pretty useful on this team, because you could use it to reset Koraidon without risking damage onto your Switch in, or roar your Shadow Rider in certain spots. Deny Trick Rooms, deny like the really heavy setup teams that were common, like the opposing Volcarona or opposing Shadow Rider. So I kind of liked the idea of Roar, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna keep it. And I kept Safety Goggles, because I was like, I am not losing to Namungus at this World Championship, as well as the Spore Pressure from Smeargle is still something you always have to fear. So Safety Goggles ended up being like my pick of choice. I also debated Cover Cloak, because that would prevent them from going for like Fake Out, Nasty Plot into Helping Hand, Astral Barrage if they lead Incineroar plus Calyx Shadow Rider, which would have been useful, but I don't regret my choice of Safety Goggles at all. So having that Roar Pressure is just pretty nice against all the things that I mentioned previously. Then I still stuck with the same Koraidon, this EV spread. I mean, it's just max HP, because it maximizes like the Flare Blitz recoil number. You want Koraidon to stick around and get multiple hits off if possible. 116 with Animate Nature gives an extra stat point boost. The 116 in speed allows you to speed creep the Landorus Incarnate, Timid Max Speed Landorus Incarnate, and with Flame Charge you're able to outspeed like Scarf Chiyu. Scarf Urshifu is guaranteed, so I wanted some speed. I also debated about having more bulk in general in Koraidon, but at that point, like, having a good fast Koraidon was still pretty impressive. And like, Koraidon was actually like either barely able to survive double ups or just barely able to survive in a lot of cases. Sometimes it might have been rolls like 2 body presses or 2 like Terragos Astral Barrages, for example. Like, there are a lot of cases where like it could have actually been that scenario. Koraidon was able to clutch up and survive a lot of attacks with the amount. I think they could have been rolls though, so a little bit more bulk over the speed would have been nice in some scenarios. But again, as being the Chiyus, I felt like one of the biggest threats to Shadow Rider, definitely appreciated. The Rillaboom pretty much ended up staying the same. Actually, don't remember why I went 188, 68, 252, or if it was 196, 60, and 252. Basically, it's the same thing at this point. I think this is the exact pace at this point, so I'm pretty sure this is what I am going with. I don't remember if I saw like some extra damage rolls between, but yeah, it's pretty much the same. And the Calix Shadow Rider, that's the one change that I think it was like my final change on this build. So the initial Calix Shadow Rider that I had was max speed, and I've been running max speed for the entire format. If you don't know, I built this team again. I built this prototype like way before, and then kind of stopped building towards, it was the middle of June, like after Japan Nat. Like I pretty much was set, but at that point it was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm running this. Then I decided to actually go into practice. I got inspired actually to start practicing like a week or the last week of July. So the reason I ended up practicing towards the late end of July is because actually it's funny. I was watching a few of my streamer buddies, and I felt like they were actually doing a big grind set. I want to shout outs to JJHAY, who's a speedrunner, and he's been killing it in Donkey Kong Bonanza speedruns. He's been getting like pretty much world record pretty much every single day at this point. So like it was really inspiring to see. And then my boy DRXX, who was working for the Pokemon Nuzlocke Invitational, like this huge event, like his numbers were popping off. I saw him like working really hard, and I'm like, man, they are having a lot of fun doing the grind. And I'm like, when was the last time I really felt like that? And I thought about it, and it was really, I did not feel that in Gen 9. The last time I felt like something like that was 2022 Worlds, where I had a blast having fun with Koraidon's Ocean at the World Championship. And then I was like, that was the last time I really enjoyed the process of like grinding and going really hard into an event. And I really don't think I had that for like this generation or the last generation. So I was like, you know what, let me give it my all and see what I can do for the 3 weeks that I have. So I ended up really getting into it, and then I decided, hey, you know what, I'm gonna practice. I used Stadium Ladder for the last season. I made a new account and was able to finish 45th place in the rank season of July, basically. So yeah, I ended up trying out the different spreads. I tried out different terra types and items across the board, and yeah, I was able to place pretty well and see like how the team was, what it was weak against, what could have been adjusted more. And the one thing I did notice from a lot of the practices, so many of the Calix Showers were just not max speed. They were not max speed for some reason. I'm like, and then I was like asking people around in like August, I'm like, is Modest Calix Shadow Rider actually real? And apparently a bunch of them were telling me yes, Modest Calix Shadow Rider was like a big thing in Japan. It ended up doing pretty well there. And I'm like, if everyone is modest, can I afford to go slower than max speed? Because this is kind of like the approach I had in Reg G, because I didn't run max speed Shadow Rider back in Reg G. I was comfortable with like losing the speed type because I had ways to play around Calix Shadow Rider, right? Because I had the Clefairy with the Friend Guard. I had the Choice Scarf Urshifu to put on pressure. Like if I could outplay instead of just going for the speed eyes, I think I'd rather take it, because I was noticing when I was practicing with my frailer Calix Shadow Rider that if I just had a bit more bulk in some of the games, like I would have actually just been able to comfortably win, or I would have just won out the game straight out. So I decided, you know, I'm going to experiment Calix Shadow Rider a bit. I'm going to take a bit of risk. I'm going to have less speed, and I'm going to put more into bulk and see if that changes me. It did wonders. Like it really did wonders during the practice in general. Towards the final few days of the Battle Stadium Ladder for July, as well as like I still ended up playing like some Battle Stadium games here and there toward like at the beginning of August leading up to the World Championship. And the bulky Calix Shadow was putting in work, because if it wasn't a Calix Shadow Rider mirror, then I was pretty comfortable with like any restrict I was tackling, because the extra bulk really did actually make a difference. It really did. Like there were times where Calix Shadow Rider was surviving on a few HP, and if I didn't have that bulk, like it was probably a game losing state. So I was very happy with the bulky Shadow Rider. If I'm facing modest Shadow Riders, if they're switching to it, I'd be faster anyway. If I'm facing max speed, they're usually Focus Sash, Encore, which I have Regieleki for, and I don't really need to go max speed against those builds. I'm completely fine with that. So I was very happy with like the bulky Calix Shadow Rider. You might be wondering like, what are the defenses extra? But because I have 20 in each of defenses, I was like doing some calcs between the different roles and like if I could get away with it, or should I go with special attack. Really, I found out that the 20 defenses end up changing like some slight damage rolls, like from just random mods in general, and it was helping me more than like, you know, investing it more into special attack. So, or just like, you know, taking out of HP and dumping more into the specific defense. So I decided, you know, I'm just gonna stick with it. And yeah, that was the final Calyx Shadow Rider, and that is the final 6 of the lock-in. So what was my practice like going into this World Championship? As I mentioned before, that it was only 3 weeks before a tournament before I really got inspired to do any kind of really serious prep. I decided, since it was the last week of July, the best practice that I could possibly get was going to be on the Battle Stadium ladder, because the ranked ladder, especially towards the end of the month, is actually some really heated competition. There are a lot of strong Japan players that will be fighting for this rank 1, and they use a bunch of different teams, and it could be teams that could be tested for the World Championship. While Showdown Ladder does have like some benefits, of course, like it does have the format like the open team sheet and the best of 3 option, I felt like I didn't really need best of 3 practice. What I needed more was just being able to know my team and play against a bunch of different teams in general. Sometimes Showdown Ladder, you'll just get a bunch of the standard teams over and over again, and that's great. But sometimes like the more trickier teams that might have more surprises are going to be like tested in closed group practice, where it's not going to be on ladder at all, or B, just going to be tested on like a best of 1 closed team sheet setting. So I felt like, okay, there isn't really too much prep that I have to do. I think in those kind of cases, I'd rather just end up practicing up against a bunch of different matchups and really truly understanding my team. And I feel like if you can accomplish that in a closed team sheet setting, and if your team is good enough, like you should be able to also accomplish that in an open team sheet setting as well. Especially since closed team sheet, you will probably have to make more commitments because of the different options you have to cover from your opponent, because you have to cover for like several different move sets and more. So that was the idea of practicing on the in-game ladder. I just really wanted to fight all the strong players that I could get, especially because like a lot of the top Japanese players do play on the stadium ladder. So I wanted to make sure that I was able to get the most valuable practice. So that was the idea of practicing on the stadium ladder. And I started a brand new account on the last week of the stadium ladder, and I had a really good start. Like, even though I was like starting at beginner tier and going to master ball tier, like as you can see, my start was pretty good. It was 21-1, and that includes several games in master ball tier, by the way. So it was pretty solid overall, I'd say, as a start. And like the practice I got was pretty phenomenal. There were a lot of games that I was able to just like fight some teams like that were even at this World Championship, like the player from the top 16 that used Ho. I ended up playing that guy a few times, and I played a few others. So yeah, like I felt like the practice was pretty good overall. It made me explore different options, I think, for my team in general, and it really made me think about like the timer aspect, especially because there were games where I would timer stall, there'd be games where I would be counting power points, and I felt like that was something I really wanted to have value, because that's just not something you can really accomplish with Showdown, which is another reason, because I like playing in game. I like using the animation timer. I don't want to be canceling my moves quickly, because that's usually what you could do on Showdown, but in game, once you lock into a move, you're locked into a move, and I want to make sure that all the thinking time, it was critical, and just to make sure that I am really concentrating. So that's the idea of playing in game. Even though I wasn't getting as many games as I possibly could have been, I felt like the game quality was just more valuable in general. Granted, there were some situations where I'm like, okay, I'm never really playing against this kind of team. Like I played like Max Speed or Saluna with like Meteor Beam Lunala on one of the Miraidon Lunala standard teams, and they had some weird sets. So of course you're going to get some games like that, but overall I felt like most of the games that I played were very competitive, so was very happy there. Started off with a 21-1, which was pretty solid, I felt like. And if you want to know the account that I decided to make, as most players did end up figuring it out after like my team was revealed, I was laddering on an account I called Egoistic, and it's just a reference to a Korean manga I read like a couple months ago. It's something called like the hero is obsessed with the villain, and it was just a really enjoyable read. Like it was a good turn off your brain and just read something, and found it enjoyable, especially like if you like isekai and stuff like that. It was just a good read. Like, so I remember that, and I was like, you know what? I need a name for my alt. I'll just go with that. Also, it did have some meaning, because I was like, I'm trying to get rid of this ego. I'm gonna say in quotes ego, because it's not like I'm saying to myself, oh, I'm the best, I'm gonna win this. It's more like, oh, it's more about like I've and a player that has been at the stage before, who has done well at this tournament. Like, I want to get rid of that feeling, because all I really want to focus for this tournament was a different mindset of just being able to play the best games that I possibly could, and just really play some good Pokemon and have some strong sets. And I felt like I played some really solid games on Stadium Ladder. Like, overall, this was the final ranking, and it wasn't as good as my start, because there were like some things, but I felt like every match there was something I could do better, some things that I learned about the team that I had to adjust over time. So yeah, I was testing different variants of the teams that I had, different Shadow Rider spreads, different Volcarona Terra types, different slight Eevee spreads here and there, but across the board it ended up completing. And by the end of the ranked season, I did finish with a 65 and 31 ratio, which I felt like was pretty good for what it was. Like, I didn't play super hard, and there was like one day I like massively like got tilted, and overall, like, I'm happy with my finish overall. I didn't want to go like too in deep and climb to like the top 30, because in case like it shows on Liberty Note of like the top 30 teams, I didn't want my team revealed. So yeah, I ended up stopping here, and I felt like it was pretty good. And overall for the season, I ended up finishing 47. So I was very happy there, like in general, because I felt like the team practice was really good. I was able to play some really high quality games, and I was really able to understand all the different modes, because I would try out like different leads, I would try out different game plans, and I was able to figure out what was going to work and what wasn't going to work in certain matchups, and felt like, yeah, it was pretty solid practice, and I really did enjoy it. Like, I was figuring out different nodes, I was learning more about the team, and that's basically what my goal was. Like, even though I only had a week for this Battle Stadium prep, I felt like it was huge. Like, it probably has made more progress than some of my previous Worlds experience practice before, like by a milestone. So it was a really huge prep, and I played here and there on the Stadium Ladder. Like, this is August. I still like kept up with a few different games per day, because I was just making sure that I was on point for the most part, because I didn't want to lose the edge. And yeah, as you could see, like, there were some good days, there were some mediocre days. I think this is like the final ranking that I end up finishing for August before the World Championship. I think I also did some practice games also in the morning of Worlds Day 1 and Day 2. But yeah, across the board, in general, this was my practice going to World. So for anyone who is curious about it, I will be making a new alt, of course. But yeah, I felt like overall super successful, really enjoyed the Battle Stadium prep, and I felt like it was accomplishing more than just the best of 3 open team sheet practice, because I felt like the games were really high quality, and just being able to play in the actual game utilizing timer and stuff was pretty valuable to me. Now, was there anything I'd really change? Not really. Like, I think the interesting part is between my practice and my actual tournament run, there were quite a few, right? For instance, a lot of the ladder games, or just a lot of games in general that I've done with this team, Volcarona was the main star. Like, I would normally bring like Volcarona, Incineroar, Rillaboom, and then Koraidon or Shadow Rider, like one of the two. I wouldn't really bring double restricted as much. I was really bringing the Volcarona mode, because the team was really well at setting up Volcarona, right? So I ended up going with Volcarona mode a lot in that practice. But in general, like at the actual World Championship, I ended up bringing the Calyx Shatter, Koraidon, and Incineroar, Rillaboom a lot more. Like, I brought Vulcan a few games, I brought Elekey a few games, but across the board, like, the initial 4 was just strong enough, which I was very surprised by, because I really thought that this would be like more of me just trying to set up Volcarona to be able to sweep opponents. But like, Volcarona was able to sweep against a few opponents, but in general, like, the Koraidon Shadow Rider stuff was just really good, which I was very surprised by. Like, I knew the core concept was good, however, I did not expect it to be my main star pilots going into this tournament. I really thought I was trying to set Volcarona, but yeah, across the board, I don't think I really regret too much of like any of the EV spreads. Roar was still good on Incineroar. Like, I went for Roar into like a lot of the Koraidons, because if they ever went for flame charge setups, I'd be able to roar them out. They don't get the speed boost to pressure my Shadow Rider. There were some cases where maybe I would have liked Helping Hand more. Helping Hand would have definitely still been a good thing, but I did click some side roars, and I did click Roar a few times at the World Championship. Even if Incineroar went down, it did prevent the setup that my opponent could have done. So I don't think I regret this in general. Like, pretty much everything, right? The Elekey was perfect. Did his job what I needed to do. Luckily, it was the only inaccurate move on my team was Electroweb. I didn't click it that many times because I didn't bring Elekey too much. And usually I was clicking Thunderbolt or Volt Switch anyway, but luckily it hit all the Electrowebs, I'm pretty sure, in anything. Again, I didn't bring it too much, so it's not like that big of a deal, but huge. Volcarona, when it did get set up, like Volcarona did win me like round 8 by itself. Basically, I was able to 1v3 Joji's Landers Incarnate, Koraidon, and Smeargle with Volcarona, Terra Water Volcarona, because he had such a bad Terra Water Volcarona matchup at that point, which was huge in round 8 because that did advance me to 7-1. Rillaboom, its special defense actually was like perfect. It was able to take the Astral Barrages at +2, or like several Astral Barrages in general. The Koraidon EV spread. Again, maybe I could have had more bulk because I didn't really face. I'm pretty sure I didn't face a timid Chi. I'm pretty sure I faced all modest Chi. So I could have had more bulk, but you know, it did end up working out pretty well. And then the Calc Shadow spread, like it pretty much got me every KO I needed, and it pretty much did survive the attacks I needed to. So that was basically perfect. Like I think the EV spreads just worked out incredible for this team, and it's exactly what I wanted. Like all the pieces worked out. Do I think it was like the best build for the World Championship? I think like it was really good for me just because I knew about, like, I played the core for like several months, so I kind of knew at this point like how to pilot it. But let me just say, some of those matches were pretty rough. Like some of those matches were very difficult, where it was like super unlikely, I think, that I'd be able to win if I like got repaired into like a bunch of different matchups, because like especially at the top level, like the 6-1s and the 7-1s when I was like into round 8 or 9, a lot of them were negative. Like the Sun stuff, like opposing Sun was negative because I didn't think I'd be facing many Calc Shatter Koraidons. I was already weak against the Groudon build, and I'm like, just dodge the Groudons or hope they lose early because it's Groudon. That mon stinks. But yeah, I was like, I'm kind of surprised that Koraidon Calc Shatter was actually like several players picks. Like I knew James Evans was probably going to run it because he probably wasn't going to bring too much, because he had been practicing Donkey Kong Bonanza, like he's been telling the Discord chat I'm in, like he's been doing anything else other than playing Pokemon. So I thought it was like maybe him, maybe a Gotti, and maybe like one other person would really run in and do well with it. I was not expecting like Koraidon to really pop off at this tournament than it did, which makes me happy that I brought Shadow Rider stuff and Koraidon more than Zamazenta, because Zamazenta will get pressured by it. But yeah, like, was it the strongest build? I'd say probably. Again, like it just happened. I think I just had more experience with like using the team and was able to pilot well. I don't think it was like an incredible call for the World Championship at the high level, because let's say if I was able to go farther, like let's say I lost to Torviv in tops, or beat Torviv in top 16, top 8, I would have played Hirofumi. That matchup super positive for me, unless I get super lucked, because it's the same matchup I played in round 8 against Joji, and he had like he couldn't really do anything. He was getting like triples or double triple spiky shields and was still losing. So I think it would, maybe I could advance to top 4, but let me just say my top 4 possibilities of like facing, like it was gonna be Geo, and I'm like, dude, the Sun matchup is terrible, man. Like when I'm facing Chi-Yu, like luckily there's no Raging Bull, but so it might have been more manageable. But Fluttermane is a pretty rough mon for this team to handle. As I mentioned before, I was expecting too much Sun going into this championship, but there were quite a few Fluttermanes that I faced, and the Focus Sash Fluttermanes, like if it's Sun plus Fluttermane, it's annoying. Like if it's anything else like Kyogre Fluttermane, then that's completely fine. But like, oh my goodness, like I barely lost to Mao, which I thought that matchup was rough. Luckily it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, but it was pretty difficult of a matchup, and I did get a bit unlucky against Mao in 3 because he got a double protect on the Shadow Rider, where I was actually in a really good spot if he didn't, because I got huge chip damage with U-turn into the Calyx Shadow Rider, was able to set up my own Shadow Rider, and like I think it would have been a really good position, but you know, it does happen sometimes. But I don't think the matches were super positive. Like James Evans, I would not want to play again. I did beat him in Swiss, but man, that I kind of had to play a bit out of my mind at that point, and it's lucky because that I played James Evans several times at this point that I was able to beat him. But I would not really want to play that rematch. Like it is not fun for this team playing like opposing, because like he has faster restricted to mine. He has faster Calc Shatter, he has faster Koraidon, and he has like a really bulky Raging Bull, which it's not a fun combo for this team. Like I did sacrifice a few things for this team matchup wise. I did, as you might have seen, my my Shadow Rider Zamazenta matchup it's like okay depending on the build. Like you might like have looked at my stream games and it might have looked awful. Like I went 2 out of 3 on stream games, and unfortunately the 2 ones I lost were on the mainstream, but those weren't fun. It really depends though. Like Torvi matchup, like it wasn't fun, but it's definitely playable. Like if I was just able to play better game 3, then sure. And I will be reviewing those games here on the channel, I suppose. So if you do want to, you know, like listen to my thought process of why I made the plays that I made, make sure you go check it out. But I'll upload that soon probably. But yeah, like I felt like the Tori matchup was fine. I just had to really outplay, and Smeargle did not have to get lucky, as well as the only one that was just really rough was against round 9, when my first mainstream match of day 2, which it's just, I mean, that's kind of matchup, as you can see. Like I'd say out of all the practice games, because I did do battle stadium for a lot of my practice, but I also did do a lot quite a few best of 3s, and that matchup was the one I was pretty scared against, because that one was the one I lost to the most in practice. Like I shouts to my boy NJ11, because he kind of destroyed me with that build. So I was like, this is rough. And I was really hoping that they would switch to like modest Calyx Shadow Rider, or maybe like a timid slower variant, because I did speed creep, like, you know, the slower Shadow Riders that are timid, and hope that I didn't face any otherwise. But yeah, like like it is a very matchup heavy call, especially if they're max speed. Like if they're slower, it's a lot easier to handle, but if they're max speed, it's just like I had to get so many calls right. And the Eliki Koraidon Shadow Rider hyper offense mode is probably the mode I had the least experience with, so I wasn't really sure on like which commitments I had to make, and it definitely showed, I think, in that set. Like my opponent played super well too in that set. Like they made every great call, and I just wasn't up to the task, because I did not have as much experience with my Reggie Eliki Shadow Rider Koraidon mode, because usually when I get an Eliki, it's usually like after a good switch in opportunity. It's not usually like my best go-to lead choice, unless I'm facing Tailwind, and then I don't even go for the Electro Whip play anyway. So yeah, my inexperience definitely showed with that. So I was really hoping that, you know, at worst I play like 1 or 2 of those matchups. It's definitely winnable too. I also didn't know the Raging Bolt was modest max speed, because usually like you lose to the Bolt if I don't have Volcarona set up, and like the few games I was able to take off NJ were involving like Quiver Dance Volcarona setups usually. So yeah, that's why I brought Raging Bolt over Koraidon in a lot of cases, so if you're wondering about that. But in general, the build was solid. I don't have any complaints about what I used. As I said before, everything basically did its job. I'm trying to think of, was there anything that I would really think? Maybe Terraghost on Eliki, because I was very tempted to have Terraghost on Eliki in some cases to, you know, usually just make them fear to fake out on the Eliki, so they usually wouldn't fake out Eliki. That was maybe the one thing, but I think I did Terra Electric maybe once or twice. So, and there were cases where I could have maybe like KO'd a Calyx Shadow of Terra Electric T-Bolt after they taken life from Chip. So I don't think, even though probably Terra Ghost might have helped me in like the situation that I probably struggled in the most, like it was still pretty good in general for what I needed. The Terra types, like the Fire Rillaboom, the Fire Koraidon, Water Volcarona, Bug Incineroar, Dark Calyx Shadow, I would not trade easily. So I felt like the team was basically perfected to what I wanted to accomplish, everything at the roles that I needed, and it definitely showed. Like it was a really strong team. It's not like a team that overwhelms opponents. It's definitely a very big positional team where it doesn't have like the biggest blow up version. Like you could do Eliki Shadow Rider, Eliki Koraidon, but in a lot of cases you don't. It's usually very positional. It's usually outplaying and outpositioning your opponent, and you do have to get quite a few reads right. But yeah, I think I definitely was able, or up to the task, especially in day 1. I think I played out of my mind in that, and yeah, like team was super solid, and can't really say too much. So that is basically the final 6. If you want to see the team in action, if you haven't already for some reason, go check out the main channel video that I have, which of course where I showcase the team on Battle Stadium. And yeah, like I go over, I guess, a brief in-depth of like the final EV spreads in general. I think I pretty much mentioned everything that I said before, but yeah, like I hope you enjoyed the thought process of like, or the team building process of like what went into this team over the course of several months. and this was the final product, a 10th place at the World Championship for my 10th World Championship. Yeah, I will take it. Like, I could have went 0-3, and as long as I had some good games at this World Championship, I would have been happy. I was very happy to play a lot of high level games, still show that I got it, I suppose. But yeah, very happy with how the World Championship went. If you'd like to check out the versions of the team, I guess they'll be down below in the description. Subscribe to this channel. Again, like the video, helps out the secondary channel. I really do appreciate it. But let me know what you think about the super in-depth content for VGC, because obviously a lot of my main audience battle content, but if you are the true James Baek fans and will listen to me talk about pretty much anything Pokemon related specifically for a while, I hope this is the channel for you, and subscribe. If you don't enjoy these kind of things, please don't subscribe. Actually, like, I beg you don't subscribe, because I would like this channel to do well, and having as many people who actually do enjoy these kinds of content stick to this channel specifically would be appreciated. You do not have to subscribe if you are more of the battle fan content, and I completely understand. They'll still be on the main channel, do not worry about it. But if you do enjoy these like more in-depth VGC related stuff, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Or if you're a true James Baek fan and want like all the extra James content with the bonus stuff of like the super in-depth nerdy analytical stuff, make sure you subscribe.